I never expected my biggest battle to come from the people I once called family. When I first met Rachel, I was just a regular guy trying to make something of myself. I had big dreams, but back then, I was just another name on a company roster, earning an average salary, trying to carve my place in the world. Rachel, on the other hand, came from old money. Her parents, Arthur and Evelyn, weren't billionaires, but they were well off enough that she'd never worried about bills, rent, or budgeting. We met at a friend's housewarming party. I remember the moment she walked in. Her presence was effortless, the kind of confidence that only came from knowing life had never truly challenged you. And yet, for some reason, she took an interest in me. Maybe it was my dry sense of humor, or the fact that I wasn't tripping over myself to impress her like the other guys. Whatever it was, it stuck. Our relationship moved fast. Within a year, I knew I wanted to marry her. It wasn't just that she was beautiful. She had a way of making me feel like I was enough, even when her family clearly didn't agree. Arthur and Evelyn never said it outright, but their skepticism of me was obvious. The backhanded compliments, the concerned remarks about financial stability, the constant reminders that their daughter had always been accustomed to a certain lifestyle. It was all a thinly veiled way of saying you don't belong here. Still, I pushed forward. I loved Rachel, and she loved me. That was all that mattered. Then came the prenup. Arthur sat me down in his study one evening, an untouched glass of bourbon sitting between us. "Listen, son," he began, using that condescending tone that made my skin crawl. "This is just a precaution. You understand, right? We need to make sure Rachel's future is secure." I understood perfectly. What he was really saying was, we don't trust you. And if this marriage goes south, you're not getting a dime. The agreement was airtight. If we divorced, I'd walk away with nothing but what I had earned myself. No claims on any assets, no access to family money, no compensations. I wasn't marrying Rachel for wealth, but the sheer distrust behind it stung. When I brought it up to Rachel, hoping for some kind of reassurance, she just sighed. "It's just a formality," she said, like it was a minor inconvenience, like it didn't bother her that her parents saw me as a financial liability. I should have pushed back. I should have stood my ground. But instead, I swallowed my pride and signed the damn thing. I told myself it didn't matter because we were building a life together from scratch. I figured, in time, I would prove them wrong. For years, life moved forward. We lived modestly, stretching every dollar, working hard to build something real. She started her career as a speech therapist, while I buried myself in my job, constantly looking for ways to move up. The prenup became a ghost, something I rarely thought about, though her parents never missed an opportunity to remind me of its existence. But everything changed when my hard work finally paid off. I'd spent years learning, networking, and taking on side projects in my spare time. Eventually, I took a risk, one that most people would have called reckless. I walked away from my steady job and poured everything I had into a startup idea I had been developing on the side. It wasn't easy. The sleepless nights, the constant uncertainty, the financial strain. It was brutal. But after 2 years of grinding, it finally took off. And suddenly, I wasn't just some guy trying to make it. I was the guy who had made it. The money started rolling in. My name was in business magazines. Investors were knocking on my door. And just like that, the dynamic shifted. Suddenly, Arthur and Evelyn weren't just tolerating me. They were proud of me. They spoke about me at their country club. They invited me to family events with open arms. It was as if, overnight, I had been granted entry into an exclusive club that I never applied for. At first, I thought I had finally earned their respect. I was wrong, because the moment they realized I wasn't just comfortable, but wealthy, their tone changed. It started subtly. A comment here, a suggestion there. Then, one night at dinner, Arthur put his fork down and said, "So, I've been thinking, now that things have changed for you financially, maybe it's time to reconsider that prenup." I nearly laughed. Now the prenup was a problem? I glanced at Rachel, expecting her to roll her eyes, to brush off her father's ridiculous suggestion. Instead, she just stared at her plate. That was when I realized, this wasn't just her parents' idea. She wanted it gone, too. That was the moment everything started to unravel. I didn't react immediately. Instead, I set my knife down, took a slow sip of my drink, and let the silence hang between us. I wanted to see if Rachel would say anything, if she would defend me, if she would shut this ridiculous conversation down before I had to. She didn't. Arthur cleared his throat and leaned forward, giving me that same patronizing look he'd worn years ago when he first handed me the prenup. It's just a conversation, son. Nothing to get worked up about. Given the changes in your financial situation, it only makes sense to reevaluate. Evelyn chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. Yes, dear. It was one thing when you were just starting out, but now that you're in a different tax bracket, well, she let out a fake little laugh. The whole dynamic has shifted, don't you think? Rachel still said nothing. I turned to her. Rachel, I said evenly, do you think we should get rid of the prenup? She hesitated, and that hesitation was like a crack in the foundation of everything we had built. Finally, she sighed and said, I just think it's outdated, Matt. When we signed it, things were different. My parents were just looking out for me. But now, she trailed off, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. But now I'm the one with money, I finished for her. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't deny it. Arthur clapped his hands together. Exactly. You understand. This isn't about distrust. It's just about fairness. Your family, Matt. We trust you. I almost laughed. They trust me now? Now that I had millions in the bank? Now that they saw me as an asset rather than a liability? I took a deep breath and forced a smile. I appreciate the concern, I said smoothly, but I see no reason to change anything. The tension at the table thickened. Arthur's mouth pressed into a thin line, and Evelyn's expression faltered for just a second before she recovered with another practiced smile. Rachel frowned. Matt, come on. We're supposed to be partners. There shouldn't be anything between us like that. There wasn't, I said simply, until you made it an issue. That was the end of dinner. On the drive home, Rachel was tense. She kept glancing at me, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. Finally, she exhaled sharply. Matt, don't make this into a fight. It's not a big deal. I kept my eyes on the road. Then why are you pushing it? I'm not pushing it. My parents just brought it up. That doesn't mean I agree with them. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Really? Because you sure didn't seem to disagree? She folded her arms, turning to stare out the window. I just think it's weird to keep a prenup when we're in a completely different place now. We're supposed to trust each other. I clenched the steering wheel. Then why are you the one acting like money changes things? Rachel didn't have an answer to that. For the next few weeks, the issue didn't die. Rachel kept bringing it up in little ways, always disguised as something innocent. Don't you think it would be nice to just not have legal paperwork hanging over us? Or, if we really trust each other, we shouldn't need something like that, right? I started to feel like I was being tested, pushed, like my refusal to tear up the prenup was some kind of betrayal. Then came the night everything changed. I was working late in my home office when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a single line. You should check your wife's texts. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank, but something about it, something about the simplicity of it, sent a chill through me. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But then, without fully knowing why, I got up, walked to the bedroom, and picked up Rachel's phone from the nightstand. I knew her passcode. She never bothered to change it. When I unlocked the phone and opened her messages, my stomach twisted into a knot. There it was. A long thread of messages with someone named Nathan. I didn't have to scroll far to see what was happening. Him, I miss you. When are you telling him? Her, I just need a little more time. He's being stubborn about the prenup. Him, you don't need him, baby. Just walk away. Her, I can't just walk away. Not yet. My heart pounded in my ears. Not yet. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was waiting to get me to tear up the prenup first. I stood there, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The weight of everything crashed down on me at once. The months of pressure, the false smiles, the careful manipulation. It had never been about trust, never been about fairness. Rachel had been planning to leave me all along. And now, I had proof. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen. My hands shook, my breathing shallow. My mind kept trying to make sense of it, to find some kind of explanation that didn't lead to the inevitable conclusion. But there wasn't one. Rachel wasn't just considering leaving. She was strategizing. I scrolled further, my pulse hammering as I took in more messages. He's always working. He barely even notices when I'm gone. Him, that's good. You deserve more than a guy who's married to his job. I know. I need to do this the right way. If I push too hard, he'll get suspicious. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around the phone. The right way. She needed to manipulate me just enough to make sure she walked away with everything she wanted. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a calculated attack. I heard the front door open. Rachel was home. My heartbeat roared in my ears as I forced myself to breathe, to think. My mind screamed at me to storm out of the room and confront her, to throw the phone in her face and demand to know how long she had been lying to me. But I didn't. Instead, I locked her phone and placed it back on the nightstand. I needed to be smart. If Rachel was planning something, I had to be 10 steps ahead. I took a deep breath, wiped any trace of emotion from my face, and walked out of the bedroom as she kicked off her heels in the foyer. "Hey," she said, giving me a quick smile. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Just finishing some work." She came over and wrapped her arms around my waist. The warmth of her body against mine felt foreign now. I wondered how many times she had held me like this while texting him. I forced myself to kiss her forehead, ignoring the bile rising in my throat. "How was dinner?" Rachel sighed, leaning into me. "Ugh. My mom spent the whole time talking about some charity event, and my dad is still annoyed that you won't budge on the prenup." I nearly laughed at the irony. "I figured," I said, brushing her hair back. "They'll get over it." She pulled back just slightly, studying my face. "You're not mad, are you?" "No," I smiled. "I get where they're coming from." Her eyes searched mine, but I had already smoothed out any edges of anger, any hint that I knew the truth. If she was playing a game, I had just made my first move. That night, I barely slept. While Rachel dozed beside me, peaceful and oblivious, I formulated a plan. I needed evidence, real evidence, not just text on a phone. If she was trying to maneuver her way into my money before walking away, I had to make sure she failed spectacularly. The next morning, I made a call. "Mr. Calloway," my lawyer answered. "What can I do for you?" "I need to make sure my finances are locked down," I said. "Completely airtight. I don't want any loopholes. And I need someone who can do a little research for me." A slight pause. Then, "I assume this is about your wife." "Yeah." Another pause. Then a sigh. "I'll get the paperwork in order. And I have someone who can look into whatever you need." "Good." I glanced at Rachel, still asleep, curled up in our bed like she hadn't been plotting my downfall. "I need to know everything." The next few weeks were excruciating. I played the part of the devoted husband while, behind the scenes, I gathered ammunition. My lawyer ran a full financial audit to make sure Rachel had no access to anything she could use against me. Meanwhile, the investigator I hired sent me updates almost daily. And what he found made my stomach turn. Rachel had been seeing Nathan for over a year. Hotel receipts, photos, dinner reservations, even a weekend trip to a beach house while I had been away for work. She had crafted an entire second life right under my nose. And it wasn't just an affair. She and Nathan had been actively making plans. One night, I received an email from my investigator. Attached was a recorded conversation between Rachel and Nathan, taken from a wire he had placed in one of their usual meeting spots. I pressed play. Rachel's voice came through, smooth and confident. "I just need to get him to tear it up. That's the last step." Nathan laughed. "And then what?" "Then," she said, her voice smug, "I file for divorce. We walk away with half of everything, and you and I get the life we actually want." Silence. Then Nathan whistled. "Damn, you're kind of ruthless, babe. You love it," she purred. I stopped the recording. My whole body was shaking, but not with sadness, with rage. Rachel had no idea, but she had just lost, and I was about to make sure she felt it. The moment I shut off the recording, a strange calm settled over me. It was like standing in the eye of a storm, knowing the chaos was about to hit, but feeling nothing but focus. The hurt, the anger, the betrayal. I boxed it all away. Emotions had no place in what I was about to do. I wasn't just going to expose Rachel. I was going to dismantle her entire plan. The next morning, I made a series of quiet moves. My lawyer finalized the financial barriers I had requested, ensuring Rachel couldn't touch a dime beyond our shared account, which I had already transferred to a separate legal entity. Any assets I had under my name were now fully protected under an LLC structure, and anything that had even the slightest loophole was immediately locked down. Then, I called my investigator. "You get everything?" I asked. "Oh yeah," he said, amused. "Your wife isn't exactly subtle. Want me to deliver everything in a pretty little package?" "No," I exhaled. "I'll handle that part myself." It was time for the grand reveal. That night, I asked Rachel if she wanted to go to dinner. "Something nice," I said. "Just us." She smiled, thinking she was winning. "I'd love that." I made a reservation at one of the most exclusive restaurants in town, the kind of place that catered to people who wanted to be seen. I wanted witnesses. I wanted an audience when I tore her world apart. She got dressed up, full effort, hair and makeup flawless, wearing a dress I had bought for her months ago. It almost made me sick, knowing she was using my money to look good for another man. We sat at our table, candles flickering between us, the sound of soft jazz humming in the background. Rachel reached across, lacing her fingers with mine. "I'm so glad we're doing this," she murmured. "We've both been so stressed lately." I forced a smile. "Yeah," I said. "A lot on my mind." I let her talk for a bit, let her relax into the moment. She had no idea what was coming. When the waiter refilled our wine glasses, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I slid it across the table toward her. Her smile faltered. "What's this?" "Open it." She hesitated, then carefully pulled out the contents, a neatly printed stack of photos. Photos of her. Photos of him. Together. Her face drained of color. I watched as she flipped through them, her hands shaking. Pictures of her meeting Nathan at a hotel. Of them kissing in a dimly lit restaurant. Of them holding hands on that weekend trip she had taken when she told me she was visiting her sister. The final image was a still frame from the recorded conversation. A clear, undeniable shot of her sitting across from Nathan, laughing as she talked about how she planned to take me for everything I had. Rachel's breath hitched. "Matt, I can explain." I sat back in my chair, resting my chin on my hand. "Oh, I know you can," I said smoothly. "You've had a whole year of practice, after all." Her eyes darted around, realizing for the first time that we weren't alone. People at nearby tables had noticed the shift in our conversation. The tension. The way Rachel's face had gone ghostly white. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Please, let's talk about this at home." "Oh, now you want privacy?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You weren't exactly worried about that when you were scheduling your betrayal, were you?" Rachel swallowed hard. "Matt, No, you listen." I cut in, my voice steel. "I know everything, Rachel. I know about Nathan. I know about your little scheme. I know you were never going to stay. You just wanted to get rid of the prenup first." I leaned forward. "But guess what? You failed." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "The prenup is still in place. My money is locked down. And thanks to your incredible stupidity, I now have enough evidence of infidelity to ensure you walk away with nothing." Rachel's breath came out in short, panicked gasps. "Matt, we can fix this. Please." I tilted my head. "Why? Because Nathan ditched you the second he realized you weren't getting a payday?" The way her face twisted told me I had hit the mark. She reached for my hand, desperate now. "I made a mistake." "No, Rachel," I said coldly, pulling away. "You made a choice." She started crying, hands shaking. But I felt nothing. I had wasted enough years on a woman who saw me as nothing but a stepping stone to a better life. I stood up, throwing a few $100s on the table for the bill. "Enjoy the meal," I said. "It's the last one you'll ever have on my dime." And with that, I walked out. Rachel didn't come home that night. I wasn't surprised. I imagined she was scrambling, desperately trying to figure out her next move. Maybe she was calling her parents, crying into the phone, spinning some sob story about how I had humiliated her in public. Maybe she was calling Nathan, hoping he'd swoop in and be her knight in shining armor. Either way, I didn't care. I had already set the final pieces of my plan into motion. The next morning, I met with my lawyer in his office. The paperwork was ready. The divorce was filed. Given the prenup and her blatant infidelity, the process was going to be brutal for her. I had also made sure to send copies of everything, the photos, the transcripts, the financial records, to Arthur and Evelyn. I didn't say anything in my email, just attach the files and let them see exactly what their perfect little daughter had been up to. And then I waited. The first explosion came just a few hours later. My phone buzzed, and for the first time in weeks, I actually wanted to answer. Matt, Arthur's voice was clipped, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of panic beneath it. We need to talk. I smirked. Oh? About what? A pause. Then, Rachel told us her side of the story. But we need to understand. Her side. I cut him off, laughing coldly. Arthur, you saw the evidence. You heard the recording. There is no side. There's only what happened. Silence. Then, he sighed. Look, Matt, we don't need to let this get ugly. I almost choked on my coffee. Ugly? Arthur, your daughter planned to rob me blind and run off with another man. I think we're past ugly. Evelyn's voice came through next, softer, more desperate. We can fix this, sweetheart. You and Rachel just need to. No, I didn't even let her finish. There's no fixing this. And frankly, I don't need your permission to walk away. Arthur exhaled sharply. So that's it? You're just throwing everything away? I clenched my jaw. Your daughter threw everything away the moment she chose to betray me, and I have nothing left to say to you. And then, for the first time in years, I did something I had always wanted to do. I hung up on them. The second explosion came that evening. Rachel showed up at the house. I saw her through the security camera before she even rang the bell. She was a mess. Hair disheveled, mascara smeared, her normally flawless exterior cracked and raw. She pounded on the door, frantic. I let her wait a full minute before opening it. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Matt, please. I crossed my arms. What do you want, Rachel? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know. She let out a shaky breath. I messed up. I tilted my head. No, Rachel. You got caught. Her face crumpled, and she stepped forward like she was going to touch me. I didn't move. I thought I wanted something else, she whispered. But I was wrong. I scoffed. Oh, so you did want something else? Glad we're finally admitting it. She flinched. No, I was confused. I was scared. You were working all the time, and I felt like I wasn't part of your life anymore. I laughed outright at that. Rachel, don't insult me. You weren't confused. You were calculated. You were waiting to get rid of the prenup before leaving me. That's not a mistake. That's strategy. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried a different tactic. I still love you. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. No, Rachel, I said quietly. You loved what I could give you. The truth finally settled in her expression. Desperation bled into fury. So that's it, she snapped. You're just done with me? Just like that? I met her gaze, my voice calm. You were done with me the moment you texted Nathan about your plan. Her face twisted with rage. You think you're so perfect, don't you? She spat. You think this is all my fault? Maybe if you hadn't buried yourself in work, I wouldn't have needed someone else. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. And there it is. The truth. You needed an escape plan. She glared at me, her hands shaking. You're going to regret this. I leaned against the doorframe, unfazed. No, Rachel. You're the one who's about to regret everything. Her lips parted, but I was already closing the door. The last thing I saw before the lock clicked into place was the pure, unfiltered panic in her eyes. She had lost, and she knew it. Rachel didn't go down quietly. For the next week, she launched what I could only describe as a campaign of desperation. It started with the texts. long-winded messages filled with apologies, excuses, and promises that she could change. She reminisced about the good times, about how we could find our way back to each other. When I didn't respond, the messages turned bitter. You're so cold, so heartless. I gave you my best years, and this is how you repay me? When that didn't work, she tried guilt. I have nowhere to go, Matt. You're leaving me with nothing. That one almost made me laugh. As if that wasn't exactly what she planned to do to me. But I didn't respond. I let her texts drown in silence, knowing my lack of reaction would drive her insane. Then she moved to stage 2, damage control. I started hearing from mutual friends, the ones she had clearly gone crying to. Some reached out just to check in, others with a clear agenda. Hey man, Rachel's really struggling. Maybe you two just need to talk? Bro, she made a mistake, but she's hurting. Are you sure you want to just throw it all away? Look, she's saying you're dragging this out to punish her, that you're trying to ruin her. That last one made me smile. No, Rachel, I don't have to ruin you. You did that all by yourself. I didn't engage. I let the storm rage around me while I moved forward with the divorce. Then came stage 3, full-blown meltdown. One afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer. Matt, I just received an interesting update, he said, his voice laced with amusement. Rachel's lawyer reached out to discuss a potential settlement. I nearly choked. A settlement? She's looking for a payout. I rubbed a hand over my face, unable to stop the grin forming. Let me guess. She suddenly realized she can't actually take anything from me? Bingo. I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. What's she asking for? A lump sum of $200,000 to walk away, amicably. I actually laughed. Rachel was trying to negotiate her way out of a financial black hole of her own making. She knew she was going to walk away with nothing, and now she was scrambling for anything. Tell her lawyer, I said, still chuckling, that my answer is a hell no. The prenup stands. She leaves with exactly what she came in with. A pause. Then my lawyer let out a satisfied hum. I thought you might say that. We hung up, and I felt lighter than I had in months. Rachel had underestimated me. She thought I was some lovesick fool who would crumble at the first sign of tears. But I wasn't that man anymore. And she was about to really feel it. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. The court upheld the prenup without hesitation. The evidence of Rachel's infidelity and attempted financial manipulation sealed the deal. She walked away with $0. No alimony. No assets. No payout. Nothing. I, on the other hand, kept everything. The house. The businesses. The investments. Every single cent of the wealth I had built with my own hands. Rachel was left with a suitcase of designer clothes she could no longer afford, a rental apartment she had to downgrade twice to keep up with, and a future that no longer included me. The last time I saw her was outside the courthouse. She stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight line, trying to keep her composure. But her eyes, were wild with barely contained panic. She had thought she could play me. She had thought she would win. But now, she was the one standing in the wreckage. She lifted her chin, trying to regain some dignity. You'll regret this one day, she said. You'll realize you let go of the best thing that ever happened to you. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. I already realized something, I said. Her brows furrowed. I realized I should have left you the moment your father handed me that prenup. Her face twisted in fury, but I was already walking away. I didn't look back. And for the first time in years, I was free. Freedom felt like an exhale I hadn't known I was holding. The weeks after the divorce were quiet, blissfully quiet. No more Rachel. No more passive-aggressive texts. No more backhanded comments from Arthur and Evelyn. Just me, my work, and the clean slate I had fought for. But that didn't mean the story was over for them. Rachel's downfall came faster than I expected. A month after the divorce, I got a call from Amy, Rachel's younger sister. Unlike the rest of the family, Amy had never treated me like an outsider. In fact, she had been the only one who warned me when things started going south. You're not gonna believe this, she said the moment I picked up. I smirked. Try me. She let out a half laugh, half sigh. Rachel is broke. Like, Broke. I leaned back in my chair, amused. She had money saved up? Amy made a yikes sound. Had. She burned through it fast. She thought she could keep up the same lifestyle without realizing just how much of it was, well, funded by you. I chuckled. Let me guess. She went back to her parents? Oh yeah, and they are not happy about it. Apparently, Arthur and Evelyn were going through their own financial problems they had worked hard to keep hidden. Business deals had gone bad. Investments had tanked. The extravagant lifestyle they flaunted was built on shaky ground, and now cracks were forming. And now they had their newly divorced daughter back under their roof, expecting them to support her. She's miserable, Amy added. I shouldn't enjoy it, but you do, I finished for her. Amy sighed. Yeah, I do. I couldn't blame her. She had spent her whole life in Rachel's shadow, watching her get everything she wanted without consequences. But now, for the first time, Rachel was experiencing what it felt like to lose. And it only got worse. A few weeks later, I got another update, this time from a mutual acquaintance. Nathan, the guy she had planned to leave me for, gone. The moment Rachel lost access to my money, he dropped her. He had never been in it for the long haul, just for the thrill of sneaking around, of being the guy she risked it all for. But once she had nothing left to offer, he disappeared without a trace. Rachel tried reaching out to me once. It was late, nearly midnight, when my phone buzzed. A simple text. I miss you. I stared at the screen for a long moment before deleting the message. Rachel wasn't missing me. She was missing the security I had given her, the life I had built, the certainty that she would always land on her feet because I had been there to catch her. But I wasn't there anymore, and I never would be again.